Good morning, everyone. Kris with Inspired Energy and joining me, Hartwell. Good morning, Hartwell.
Good morning, Kris. Good
How
morning,
are we this
everyone.
morning?
Not entirely sure. Not entirely sure.
Um, so, this morning, we're continuing our adventure here as a survey through the planets in human design. And where we had left off was the last planet that we looked at was Mercury, and the next one to go to is Venus. So, do you want to tell
Well,
us a
no,
little
I
bit?
think we ended off with the moon, Kris.
Well, I marked it on my page.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Well, maybe you marked so that Mercury is next. No?
I don't know. If you want to do Mercury, go ahead and do Mercury.
I feel like Mercury needs to get a little love because I don't
Okay.
remember talking about Mercury.
Okay.
Yeah, on our survey of planets and how they apply in human design, we're at Mercury now. Forgive it if it's redundant. But this is what we need to communicate. Um, According to human design, it's what we need to communicate. It's about how we expand our consciousness. So, I mean, in traditional astrology, Mercury would be more how we communicate. Here, we're saying that it's a what. That's an interesting difference. Um, so, for Kris, maybe, what you need to communicate is logic, gate 63. That's one of your Mercury gates. And that's at the very top of the head body graph in the head center. So you need to communicate your willingness to deal with your doubt in all sorts of different ways because it's in line 3. So does that sound like maybe it makes sense to you?
I doubt it.
We're
I'm
just
joking.
we're
I,
just playing here, people, with these
yeah.
things because we have to find our way into how to think about this. Human design really doesn't think so much about the individual planets and talk about them psychologically like astrology does. But here we're playing with that because it's fun.
Mhm.
Now, Venus is our values and morals and the natural laws that govern our behavior. So that's a big mouthful.
It's a
That's a big
big
mouthful.
thing.
Um, it's all about, in traditional astrology, we talk about it about being beauty or about the way that, how we magnetize things towards us. Here we're talking about natural laws that guide our behavior. What could we use as an example? Well, Kris, you have your Venus in gate 3, which is the gate of ordering, which is part of your channel of mutation.
Hmm.
So part of the values you have is to bring order out of chaos, to want to be engaged with transformation.
Hmm.
So that's a natural law that governs your behavior on some level, which is a
Hmm.
kind of an interesting concept.
That makes sense.
Do you want to say anything more about that?
Well, it makes sense because I'm all about change and adaptability and making things work. And if that doesn't work, let's find another way.
Yeah.
That tends to be a theme, or to learn from a mistake so you don't make it next time. And it's all kind of the same sort of thing, right? And it's just innate within me. Like, even if I try to stop it, I can't. My brain is always thinking that way. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that could, what you just said, could to describe the 63 we just talked about, always
Hmm.
looking for new solutions. Yeah,
Hmm.
so it's hard to kind of differentiate these because it's integrated within us.
Right.
What's, what does our Mercury, what is our Mercury responsible for versus our Venus?
Hmm.
Mars has to do with passion and desire and assertiveness. Over time, it can become, part of how we use energy correctly.
Hmm.
Um, but when we're young, it can potentially result in an immature expression in ourselves. Interestingly, Kris, this is where your gate of the provocateur is. Your Mars is the gate of the provocateur. Um, you have more than one planet in that gate, but
Hmm.
Mars is one of them. So it's like, over time, maybe you're learning how to deal with that.
Hmm.
how to provoke people into the right spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Jupiter, I'm sort of going through these because I expect to be one of these will catch us up with some sort of interesting commentary. Jupiter is about blessings and expansion. And here in human design, it also is related to law and protection. The law of what is correct for us can bring good fortune as long as we are obedient to our own law. Isn't that an intriguing idea, Kris?
Yeah, that's
Our own law. I mean, if we, I'm using mostly here, I'm using our personality placements because in human design, you're more aware of the personality, the black in your chart.
mm-hmm.
So for you, this law of what is correct for you is in gate 41. Gate 41 is the gate of fantasy, where we spark new ideas and get excited about the journey and the adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as you would say, adventure, Jamie, adventure.
How it gets me in trouble. Then I end up taking on too much.
But this is, this is some indication of what is correct for you. Now, where's my Jupiter? My Jupiter is in gate 55. So gate 55 is the gate of the spirit of the self, or the gate of spirit. And so it is about finding that spark in life that makes things worthwhile, that enthusiasm, that joy, that and so that's kind of fun. Huh. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
um, so on some level, engaging with that,
Mm-hmm.
engaging with the hopefulness of that, the spirit of that, is something that helps me be correct. Um, that's what's correct for me, to be in alignment with that.
Mm-hmm.
Saturn is one of my favorite ones to talk about in traditional astrology. In human design, this is, before we're 28, this is a significant challenge for us. It's the judge, the discipline, and over time we can see where we progress in relationship to Saturn. It's where we have to deal with consequences. If we do not follow our own law, which is Jupiter, then we deal with the consequences with Saturn. Interesting to think about. You see, I haven't thought deeply about all of these things yet. 60 is where we get bitten in the, Saturn is where we might get bit in the butt if we don't do our Jupiter, is kind of what it seems to be suggesting to me.
Yeah, I have 60.
You do. That's where your Saturn is. So I
Yeah.
was looking at that and then I thought, okay, where do you get bit in the butt? If you do not, if you not, we'll just play with it for a second. Do you mind?
No,
I've been doing that.
depends. What are you going to say?
Gate 41 is about
Mm-hmm.
your Jupiter gate is about initiating based upon your dreams and your fantasies and what excites you. If you don't do that, then you get caught up in gate 60, which is a gate of limitation, and maybe life feels burdensome, perhaps. I could
Mm-hmm.
riff and talk about that.
Right.
For me, it's interesting because I have Saturn in gate 41, whereas your Jupiter is in gate 41.
Mm-hmm.
So if I do not cultivate spirit in life and pay attention to that, then the gate of fantasy bites me in the ass. Maybe that means that I get lost in fantasy. Maybe it means I get lost in daydreaming.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that the 4160 for myself because I'm always starting things and I get excited about starting them. But then when they're not in alignment for me, then they become very heavy, very burdensome. And that's happened to me several times in my life that I can think of, especially, like with work or anything
Mhm.
like that. Um, I can relate to that.
Okay. So, I mean, it does take a little contextualizing too,
Mhm.
just like astrology would too. How is this working? If we move on to Uranus now, when we talk about Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, we're really talking about planets that don't necessarily affect our character, but they affect, um, maybe we could call them portals. They're
Mhm.
portals into a collective dimension of life,
Mhm.
but they're not subject to our individual control. So, what does human design have to say about it? Uranus is a place in our chart where um, we have a experience of unusualness, being unusual, or life being chaotic, or where we express our unusualness. Um, For you, your Uranus is in gate 4, which would suggest gate 4 is the gate of formalization up in the ajna part of your channel of part of the channel you've got up there, and it would suggest that there's something unusual about the way you express your hypotheses, your answers for life in the world. Um, for me, it's in the gate of sexuality, gate 59. So there'd be some perhaps unusual experience there in my
Mhm.
Neptune. Neptune, the planet of illusion and spirituality, can feel elusive. It can feel like it cloaks our experience. But it's an area where, in order to get the lessons, we're going to have to accept and surrender. So it's a place where that surrender is more called for. In your case, Kris, we have it in gate 44. Gate 44 is the gate of alertness. Um, that's the gate that has this instinctive knowledge for the capability of others. So it's a gate that has to do with smelling opportunity, or having a sense for the opportunities in life. So
Mhm.
in some ways, that's how your spirituality enters, perhaps. Maybe you sense things about other people's capabilities. Maybe you have this sense that draws you forward into life based upon what you sense as the potential.
Yeah, I can say that's true for me. I tend to always see people's potentiality, and so I'm always trying to help them with that. Can get me in trouble many times, but good morning, Gary. You joined us. Awesome.
Ah. For me, Neptune is in gate 1, so there's an elusiveness for me around creative expression.
Hmm.
And so with Neptune there, it suggests that I need to surrender to that area of my life to have the best results in order to really move into my spirituality. So there's a connection between creative expression and spirituality, perhaps, for me.
Hmm.
And I find that an intriguing thought for sure.
That makes sense.
Pluto is our last one, and it's all about truth and transformation in human design. It
Hmm.
brings the subconscious to the surface.
Hmm.
Um, it's where we're forced to face the truth potentially. Um, for you, Kris, that would be in the area gate 40, your
Oh,
favorite gate. You know,
yeah, my favorite gate that I have four of.
yeah, the gate of aloneness. This is where
Yeah.
you have to face the truth.
Hmm.
It's something, the truth about, clearing out from your subconscious any patterning you have around the use of the will. Um, my will or God's will? What is the
Hmm.
difference? How do I figure that out? Where
Hmm.
is the truth in that? Um, we could get pretty deep, if
Hmm.
we tried to dive right into these things. For me,
Yeah.
do you have any comments about that?
Well, I I can see that being the case, because it's always difficult, especially I find with that channel of doubt and my whole process of, the channel of logic and everything and processing information. As I'm doing that, I am thinking, well, is this me, or is it the drive coming from somewhere else? Or so, I mean, it makes sense to me, but I can push myself to exhaustion, which I know is, the shadow side of that. I can get so deep into something and want to make something work that I can just use up all my energy.
Yeah. Um, so, and for me, my Pluto is in gate 64, the gate of confusion. The gate of confusion, yes. So, and which is also has some link with the imagination. So, facing the truth in that sense, maybe it's about facing the fact that there's always going to be things that confuse us about life, things that won't be able to fit within our paradigm, and that some sort of accommodation needs to be made for those. And perhaps the imagination is one of the things that can help us develop a relationship with that.
Yeah.
I'm just riffing here, based on my own experience and based on the placement. Problem, in the wider human design world, I don't think that people necessarily, it's not encouraged, or I haven't seen it done, where people reflect on the meaning of the planet in relationship to the gate.
Well, do you want to do something fun? Because
Yeah.
Gary's online. Gary, do you want us to look at your Pluto and which gate is in there? Because I know that we have your chart.
Have we got
So
permission?
we can have some interaction between our clientele. Okay, he says sure. And Dragona, if you're still there, if you want us to look at yours, I don't have your chart, but if you tell us which gate is in Pluto, we can certainly do that for you as well. So let's start with Gary.
Well, Gary, you have your Pluto, which represents a place of transformation for you in life, in gate 59, which is called the gate of sexuality. And this is about removing the barriers to intimacy. So, in some level, a lot of transformation in your life is arising through the theme of transparency with others. How do you break down boundaries with them? What is the truth that you have to face and sort of integrate through that gate of sexuality? So that's a little flavor. And I mean, it could be that as I was saying, Kris, in the human design community, I don't think that people do what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Gary
Says trust. Trust. So yeah. Kind of
trust,
the theme, right?
Yeah.
And Dragona's not sure, but she says 52 comes to her.
Well, if she had Pluto in gate 52, that would represent lessons and transformation. Gate 52 is the gate of stillness down in the root center. And its pressure is to lock us into something so that we can get to the logical pattern buried at the root of that thing. It's the ability to meditate for hours at a time. So it's like somehow by integrating that, your truth comes when you are still, when you are engaged with something that is very deep. That if that's your placement, that could be some potential thoughts on that.
All right. Well, that was fun. It's fun interacting with you guys. Thanks for participating and letting us go through that with you. Is there anything you want to tell us about the planets and human design and how that whole thing works before we sign off, Hartwell?
Well, I would suppose that my lesson, or what comes to me from exploring these different systems, is that um, they are aspects of the warp and the woof of our life. They're aspects of the threads that make up who we are. And so astrology, and here we're talking about human design primarily, can be a way of entering into a meditation on ourselves. And I believe that that engagement is fruitful on some level always for those of us who are seeking to live an examined life. So whether we're doing it in the way that the founder suggested or not, we're creative beings who find our own way into things. And there is something to find your way into, is what human design and astrology and all these systems would say. We are designed. We have a particular uniqueness to us. And so there is something to be discovered.
So
It's not just imagination.
Yeah, so kind of what comes to me with summing that all up is, be the change that you want to see in the world is to look inward at ourselves. If we want a better world, then we need to look at how we're designed to actually function in the world so that that can be a possibility. That the change comes from within, right? So,
Well, I think the change is a byproduct. If you are the desire to change the world can be suspect in the sense that, Hitler had a desire to change the world as well, but the desire to kind of, I think, know ourselves and our place in the universe, which can lead to self-examination and self-study. I think being the change, as you speak about it, Kris, I think it comes as a byproduct of understanding ourselves and reality more deeply. And then we know how to change the world in a way that is going to be healthy.
yeah. Yeah. It's like, because without knowing yourself, you don't know how to be in the world the way you were designed to be. So you can't effectively make change unless you can be what you're designed to be, right? You kind of fumble in the dark until then, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I like how you put that. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Do we know what we're talking about next week, or is it a surprise again?
It's a surprise.
Okay. Well, with that, I want to thank you both for joining us this morning and actually participating, because it's a lot of fun for us to have the interaction as well. So with that, we're going to sign off and say God bless, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Take care, everybody.
Bye.